Real stories of werewolves, of Dogman from history, from your emails, illustrated and animated with the democratizing magic of machine learning AI. Welcome to Scary Stories.
Lost Dogman City, beneath Pyramid Peak. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I'll never forget the sight. The cavern stretched wider than any football field, its ceiling vanishing into the darkness. Jagged rock formations loomed overhead, casting eerie shadows against the dim, flickering light. At first I couldn't see the source of the glow, but as my eyes adjusted, I spotted strange fire-lit pits scattered across the underground city. Structures, crude yet unmistakably built by intelligent hands, rose in clusters. Some seemed chiseled from stone, others formed from stacked boulders, arranged like primitive dwellings. But it wasn't the city itself that made my breath catch in my throat. It was them. They moved in silence, their hulking bodies covered in thick dark fur. Their heads were unmistakably canine, long snouts, pointed ears, gleaming yellow eyes that reflected the firelight. They walked upright, their clawed hands gripping tools, crude spears, and torches. I counted at least 24 of them in the open, but the many deeper recesses of the city suggested there could be many, many more. My guide, an old Hopi man named Tawaima, pressed a hand against my chest, signaling me to stay low. We crouched behind the boulder, watching in stunned silence. The Dogmen, if that's what they were, seemed to be engaged in daily routines. Some patrolled the outskirts, their snouts twitching as if sniffing for danger. Others gathered in small groups near the fire pits, communicating in a language of growls and guttural sounds. A few entered darkened tunnels, disappearing into the unknown depths. These were not mere animals. They had purpose. They had a society. I was so scared I thought I was gonna faint. And then, it happened. One of them stopped. Its head jerked up. Its ears twitched. Slowly, it turned its gaze toward our hiding place. I couldn't breathe. The creature inhaled deeply, its nostrils flaring. A low rumbling growl rose in its throat. The others got quiet and noticed, pausing in their tasks to glance in our direction. Tawaima's grip on my arm tightened. His whisper was barely audible. "Run!" The Dogman released a sharp barking sound, an alarm, and then they all moved. No one ever believed me when I told them that story. Not then, not now, but I remember what I saw. I don't tell the story for fame or attention. I have no need for either at my age. I tell it because I'm running out of time, and if I take this truth to my grave, it may never be spoken again. I was a different kind of guy in my younger years, always restless, always chasing stories, drawn to the unknown like a moth to flame. My travels took me all over the country, but it was the American Southwest that truly captured my imagination. The legends, the myths, the things whispered about but never written down. That was the kind of knowledge I sought. This was sometime between 1982 and 1984. My memory isn't as sharp as it once was. I had taken a long drive through Arizona, stopping at old trading posts and roadside stands, talking to anyone who had a story to share. And that's when I met Tawaima. He was an old Hopi man, standing outside a weathered shop off the highway, selling handmade crafts. His eyes held something different, a weight, a knowing. I bought a small stone carving from him, and when he saw my interest in legends, he told me one that I had never heard before. "You know there's a lost city beneath Pyramid Peak," he said. "Goes over a mile deep, a place of shadows, a place of watchers." I laughed at first, thinking he was spinning a tale to entertain me, but there was no amusement in his face. "No, it's real," he said. and for the right price I can show you." Curiosity overruled my caution. I paid him without hesitation, not knowing that what I was about to see would haunt me for the rest of my life. The road to Pyramid Peak was long and lonely, stretching through the Arizona desert like a scar across sun-baked earth. Tawima and I traveled in silence, the old man at the wheel of his battered truck, its engine grumbling with each passing mile. The farther we went, the fewer signs of civilization remained. No gas stations, no houses, just the endless expanse of rock and sand. I had my doubts, of course. Any man with any sense would. What if he was leading me into the middle of nowhere just to rob me? Or worse, leave me stranded? But something about Tawima told me he was a man of his word. He had no need for deception. His warning had been clear. You will see, and then you will wish you had not. By late afternoon, Pyramid Peak came into view, its jagged outline rising from the desert like the weathered remains of some ancient monument. The sight of it sent a chill through me, though I couldn't say exactly why. It was just a mountain after all. But the way Tawima's grip tightened on the wheel told me that he felt the weirdness too. We reached the base of the peak just before sunset. There was no trail, no markers, just rock and dust. Tawima gathered his supplies, a lantern, a bundle of sage, a length of old rope. He carried no weapons. "Leave your flashlight," he said when he saw me checking my bag. "Only firelight will guide us." I obeyed, although I didn't understand. As we made our way up the rocky incline, the world around us felt silent. No wind, no insects. Even our footsteps seemed swallowed by the hush of the desert. My stomach tightened with unease. Then we reached it. The entrance. A narrow crack in the stone, barely visible unless you knew where to look. Tawima turned to me, his expression unreadable. "This is your last chance," he said. "If you go in, you do not speak. You do not make a sound." I nodded, and with that, we stepped into the darkness. The air changed the moment we crossed the threshold. It grew thick, damp, carrying the scent of earth and something else, something old, something not meant for the surface world. The walls of the tunnel closed in around us, rough and uneven, as if the mountain itself had swallowed us whole. Tawima moved ahead, his lantern casting flickering shadows. I followed, careful to keep my footsteps light. The descent was slow and treacherous, the ground uneven, the passage narrowing in places to force us to squeeze through sideways. I lost track of time. The deeper we went, the more I felt the weight of the earth pressing down. My breaths grew shallow. I could hear my own heartbeat echoing in my ears. Then came the first sign. A footprint, large, inhuman, pressed deep into the damp soil. My mouth went dry. Tawima saw it too. He knelt beside it, running his fingers over the impression. He didn't speak, but his expression told me everything. We weren't alone down there. We pressed on, moving slower now, every step deliberate. The tunnels widened, revealing strange carvings etched into the wall, symbols I didn't recognize, crude depictions of creatures that stood on two legs but bore the heads of wolves. A chill crawled up my back, and then we heard it. A distant sound, low and guttural, like the rumble of a storm deep within the earth. I turned to Tawima, but he didn't look at me. His eyes were fixed ahead. The tunnel opened into a vast, weird chamber, with walls and windows and steps carved directly into the living rock. For the first time, I saw the glow of firelight dancing against the stone. We had arrived, and the underground city of the Dogman was waiting for us. Stepping into the vast underground chamber was like crossing over into another world. The stale, humid air carried an overpowering stench. Something wild, something bestial. It was the unmistakable reek of damp fur, sweat, decay, thick enough to coat my tongue. I fought the urge to gag, forcing myself to breathe through my mouth. The glow of distant firelight illuminated the space in flickering patches, casting long, shifting shadows against the stone. My eyes struggled to adjust, but when they did, I nearly forgot how to breathe. Before me stretched the inside of a city, I guess you could call it that. Carved directly into the rock, the underground dwellings were stacked upon one another in a labyrinth of burrow-like structures, winding tunnels, stairways, and archways. Some openings led into deeper unlit corridors, while others flickered with the glow of crude torches, revealing crude stairways, platforms, and ramps. Narrow walkways connected the levels, and I saw movement, figures passing between the openings, emerging from the darkness, only to slip back into it moments later. But they weren't human. They were dogmen. At first they moved like ghosts, unseen but felt, their presence lingering at the edges of my vision. And then, as my senses sharpened, I saw them more clearly. They were taller than I'd expected, standing well over 6 feet, with long limbs and hunched, sinewy bodies, covered in patchy, matted fur. Their heads were unmistakably canine, elongated snouts, sharp ears that flicked at the slightest sound, and eyes that gleamed in the firelight. Their noses twitched constantly, scenting the air as they moved with a predatory grace. But the most unsettling part? They did not speak. I had always assumed that if such creatures existed, they would be like werewolves in the old stories, able to snarl out words in some guttural, monstrous voice. But these dogmen communicated only through gestures, growls, and body language, sort of like real wolves. The silence made them seem even more alien, more primal. From our hiding place in the tunnel's shadowed edge, I could see them going about their lives. Some crouched in small groups, their clawed hands working over raw animal hides, stripping flesh from bone with jagged knives made of stone or rusted metal. Others carried torches, moving up and down the pathways with a sense of purpose, their eyes ever watchful. I saw what looked like a central gathering area, a wide-open space where at least a dozen dogmen sat around a fire, tearing into slabs of meat. They didn't cook it. The flesh was raw, and they ripped at it with their teeth, their powerful jaws crunching through bone with ease. The sound of it, the wet tearing, the crack of bone, it made my stomach feel ill. Tawaima crouched beside me, unmoving. I turned to him, whispering, "How many are there?" His expression was grim. He raised 2 fingers, then 3, then more. At least 50, maybe more. I swallowed hard. The longer we watched, the clearer it became. This was not some small, isolated group of creatures hiding in the shadows. This was a city. This was a society, a civilization, in its own strange and savage way. There were tunnels leading deeper into the earth, and in the flickering light, I saw figures moving in the distance, beyond where my eyes could follow. How far did it go? How many of them were there? Suddenly, movement near the far side of the chamber caught my eye. A large dogman emerged from one of the tunnel openings, and the others around the fire immediately fell still. It was different from the rest. This one was bigger, broader, its fur thicker and darker. Scars marred its face, and it walked with a slow, deliberate authority. This was a leader. It stood at the center of the gathering space, looking over the others, before lifting its snout and sniffing the air. My blood turned to ice. It smelled us. Tawaima grabbed my arm, his grip like iron. He pressed a finger to his lips, eyes full of warning. We had been careful, so careful, but the scent of 2 outsiders in their domain was not something these creatures could manage to ignore. The leader let out a low rumbling growl, and instantly, the other dogmen were on alert. Heads snapped in our direction, ears twitching. Some crouched, their muscles tensed. Others rose, their nostrils flaring. One of them moved toward us. It was slow at first, cautious, its long fingers grazing the stone as it sniffed the air again. It let out a short, clipped bark, a signal. More movement. Others were creeping closer, their eyes locked on the shadows where we hid. I barely dared to breathe. Tawaima tensed beside me, gripping his bundle of sage. His other hand hovered over his lantern, ready to ignite it. The dogman nearest to us hesitated. Then its ears perked. Its head tilted slightly, as if listening to something. And then, its eyes locked onto mine. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then, it bared its teeth. Not in a snarl, not in a show of aggression, but in something even worse. Recognition. It knew we were there, and it sure told the others. A sharp barking rang out, and the effect was instant. The stillness shattered. The dogman surged forward. Tawaima didn't hesitate. He struck his flint, the lantern flaring to light in a burst of orange flame. The dogmen recoiled, their eyes flashing in the sudden light. "Run," Tawaima whispered, and we did. We turned and bolted back the way we had come, our footsteps slamming against stone as snarls and howls erupted behind us. The chase had begun. The tunnels blurred around me as I ran, my breath ragged, my heartbeat hammering in my ears. Behind us the dogmen surged forward, their claws scraping against the stone, their snarls echoing like a pack closing in on wounded prey. Tawaima led the way, his steps sure despite the darkness. I followed blindly, trusting him to know the path, even as terror gripped my chest. My lantern swung wildly in my grasp, its flickering light casting monstrous shadows on the walls. A sharp barking rang out, too close behind us. I risked a glance back and saw them, a mass of dark shapes bounding on all fours, their glowing eyes locked onto us. They moved with terrifying speed, their lean bodies made for the hunt. "Faster," Tawaima whispered. The tunnel sloped upward, but my legs were burning, my lungs screaming for air. I pushed forward, knowing that slowing down meant instant death. And then, suddenly, a split in the path. Tawaima veered left without hesitation. I followed, but as I turned, my boots slipped on loose rock. I hit the ground hard, the impact jolting through my bones. The lantern flew from my hand, shattering against the stone. Darkness swallowed me. I heard the dogmen skidding to a stop, their panting breaths filling the tunnel. My heart nearly stopped. Tawaima's hand found mine, and in the darkness, he yanked me up. "Move." With no light to guide us, we ran, blindly, feeling our way through the tunnel's curves. The snarls grew hesitant behind us. Fire had scared them before. Perhaps the sudden darkness confused them. And then ahead, faint moonlight. The exit. With one final push, we stumbled into the night, collapsing onto the rocky ground outside. Behind us, the cave mouth gaped like an open wound. But the dogmen did not follow. They lingered inside those shadows, their eyes gleaming, their bodies tense. And then, as if bound by some unseen rule, they retreated. The cave swallowed them up once more. For a long while we lay there, gulping in the cool night air. My entire body trembled, not just from exhaustion, but from the weight of what we had seen. "They won't come out," Tawaima said finally, staring at the dark cave mouth. "Why?" I asked. He shook his head. "That is their world," he nodded toward the entrance. "Toward the surface and stars overhead, though," he said, this is ours." I wanted to press him for more, to demand answers, but I was too drained to argue. My mind reeled, replaying what we had witnessed. A city, a society, intelligent, but not in the way we are. Not werewolves, not myths, but real creatures. Tawima sat in silence, his expression unreadable. I wondered how many others he had led here, if they had made it out, if anyone else knew the truth and chose, like him, to keep it buried. "Why did you tell me?" I finally asked. He exhaled slowly. "Because you paid me." And I had. We left Pyramid Peak behind before dawn, the desert stretching out before us like an empty, silent witness. I never saw Tawima again after that. I only told the story a few times, but nobody believed me. And even now, decades later, I can still smell the musk of those creatures' fur. I can still hear the wet crunch of their teeth on raw meat. I can still feel the weight of those golden eyes, piercing through the darkness. And sometimes I wonder, are they still down there? In the Lost City, underneath Pyramid Peak.
Team Dogman for men of the world. And it also looks cute on girls. The hat says Dogman, I'm happy to meet you. But there's no guarantee that Dogman won't eat you. Team Dogman hat, it's the prescription. The link to get your own is in the description.
Thanks, Biggie. And thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button, or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that one. It cuts off after, I think, 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.